My name is LuLu LeMans. I'm 27 years old from Brisbane, and I'm Brisbane's tallest fashion icon. So extend the doorways next time I'm coming over. So when you come to a LuLu show, you can expect to see everything from a silly comedy number. Like if you've ever wanted to see Emma Wiggle get her tits out, I'm your girl. But I can get down and dance in the nightclub as well. I can do those sort of shows. And I also love to do a good power ballad as well and just give you some classic drag. I think one of my favorite things is my versatility and the fact that I can do everything on the spectrum of drag, and I love it all. I don't have a particular favorite type of gig, but the gigs that I remember the most are the ones where everybody's on board and everybody's having a great time. So whether that's for 10 people or 10,000 people, if everyone's having a great time, I'm having a great time. I've done a good job. So drag kind of came about accidentally. So I used to dress up for Halloween and things like that and experiment with costume makeup, and I always loved the makeup side of things. But I was over the partying. By the time I actually started doing any kind of drag, I was like 23, 24 even. So I really was over it by then. But then my partner started to practice with makeup, and I had experience and he didn't. And I was giving him feedback, and then one day he got sick of me giving him feedback because I wasn't doing it myself. And I thought, stuff you, I'm gonna show you how it's done just to prove a point. And then next minute I did it, I enjoyed it, and now here we are. So basically the thing that kept me going was just how much fun it was. Like, it's pretty hard to have a dull day when you're dressed with a purple wig and a rainbow leopard print outfit on. It doesn't get much better than that. So my first experience doing drag was in my bathroom at home, and we bought, I think, about $15 worth of makeup from Big W, which was about 50 products. And we sat there and I painted a face on for the first time. And I remember looking at the mirror and I was like, I am Shania Twain right now. Like, you can't tell me otherwise. And it was this level of confidence that I'd never really experienced before, because I've always been a bit unsure of myself. And then the second I saw that, there was this whole other character inside me that was sure of themselves and didn't have the insecurity. And then it took off from there. But my first experience in drag out on the town happened about 18 months later, where I went to Brisbane Pride for the first time. And the same sort of thing happened. I thought it was just going to be a one-off, and I was insecure about the thought of being in public. I thought I was just going to be like bad and laughed at. And then I got out there and I found myself walking a different way and talking a different way and engaging with people. And I went from being somebody who would comfortably sit in the background to wanting to be front and center of the Pride Parade. So drag has just been, each first experience is a different way of finding confidence and expression within myself. A working week is exhausting, I would say, is the first adjective that comes to mind. A week typically will start later in the week because obviously drag happens usually on the weekends. So it shifts the whole schedule to become weekend focused. So my Friday is like a Monday. If anybody calls me on a Monday wanting anything to do with business, they're going to get my answering machine. Each week is a little bit different. I have my routine kind of residency gigs. So when you've been doing drag for a while, you start to get booked for recurring events. And I'm fortunate enough to have, I think, 5 or 6 on the go at the moment. That's not weekly. A few of them are, but they pop up. You know, I might have one that reoccurs every month or every week or whatever. So those are the guarantees. And then what happens outside of that is different every single week. So basically, I'll get up in the week, I'll check my diary. I might have a private gig on the weekend. Somebody might have booked me for a hen's party. So I'll like organize a time to give them a call and be like, hey, I'm your fabulous drag queen. It's gonna be the best night of your life. What do you want from me at the party? And do a bit of admin, send off all the invoices, which is the best part of doing drag. Gigs start to roll in later in the week. So then it's kind of, okay, have I got my costumes ready? What shows do I want to do? Are my wigs ready? Do I need to clean the lace or clean my costumes, or what do I want to do? So you start to mentally prepare. If you've got like a big nightclub gig, usually that involves some rehearsal as well, because normally it's not just me performing by myself. So get in and have a bit of a practice for that. Maybe you've got a new costume coming, so you're going to be consulting with designers, or you might be sending some wigs off. Like, each week involves a lot more admin. Being a professional drag queen involves probably, I'd say, 18 hours of being in drag a week, and probably about 30 hours of being out of drag, getting that person ready. So it takes a lot of effort. As my drag has grown, the responsibility and the requirements of being in drag has grown as well. I think I'm in a very unique position to be able to explain the differences in audience between every event that a drag queen can do, because I'm probably in terms of drag queens in Brisbane, there's probably nobody who does a greater variation of gigs than I do. So a drag brunch audience, for example, is similar to a hen's party audience. So I'd say they're kind of a similar market for drag. And I'd say it's a very new market for drag as well that has always been waiting there, but we're finally giving them what they want. So a drag brunch, typically you walk in there and I'd say the average age is between about 35 and 50. And I would say 70% of the people in the room are probably women. So you go in there and it's like your mum or your auntie or somebody who wants to come and see drag and they can't get out in the night and they want to just come and see us get out there and be bold and brave and be ourselves. So every single week at Drag Brunch, I'll have somebody come up to me who's like 40 years old or 50 years old who come up to me at the end and just like be crying me like, I've had the best day of my life. I'm so proud. You just keep being you. And I think that comes from a place where these people have never really been exposed to such aggressive self-expression. Like that's such a foreign concept for so many people. So for them to get a little peek behind the curtain into this fabulous gay world of drag that we have, creates such a strong emotional response. So it's gone absolutely gangbusters. Like our audiences for drag brunch in Brisbane in particular. So we came back literally the week that the first sort of lockdowns lifted in Queensland, so July 2020. Since then, we have sold out every single weekend, and that's 170 people every weekend for nearly 3 years. So that speaks volumes to the fact that if you give back to this sort of audience, they're going to show up for you and have a great time, which is great for us and great for them. But that audience is very different to like a traditional nightclub crowd. So rock up to a nightclub on a weekend night, and you'll have, you know, your typical like gay crowd will be there as well, and they're, you know, they don't care usually what the drag queen's doing. They're just there to find a ride home. But even in the clubs now as well, there's a huge percentage of people who have grown up watching Drag Race. So the first season of Drag Race came out in 2009, which means some of the people in the club who have just turned 18 have known of Drag Race since they were 5 or 6 years old. So it's created this entirely different market for us to perform to. So there's people who just go to these clubs now, not to go clubbing like we all did 10 years ago, but they go to these clubs to see drag queens in the flesh because it's become such a market. Performing to someone's mum in the morning at Drag Brunch means you come out and you do Raining Men, you do Man I Feel Like a Woman, you do the classics, you get them singing along, come out as Cher, they love it. And then over nighttime you can get out there and perform what's on the charts now, and you can perform the TikTok songs and you can do all this kind of stuff and explore a bit more of the creative side of drag. To please this other audience who loves the art of drag and is not just amazed by it. They're actually there and they're familiar with the lexicon, they're familiar with the art, they're familiar with what makes good drag. Whereas the mums are very easily pleased, which makes life very easy on a Sunday morning. So yeah, that's very different crowds, and there's even, drag has permeated into other events now as well. So for example, I'm involved in a comedy show now. So we do a show called The Switch Up, where we have comedians and drag queens come along. The drag queens will do their show, the comedians will do their show, and then they swap. So the comedians get put into drag, and then the drag queens have to do a roast, which I love because I get to do it every single time. But it means that now I'm exposed to the comedy audience as well. I do another show where we perform with a big band and burlesque performers. So I'm out there hosting with a crowd that's come along to see a big band, or they've come along to see like very classical burlesque. So there's these, I'll routinely have audiences where people are 70, 80, 90 years old coming to watch the big band do New York, New York, and I'm out there in a leotard pretending to be Emma Wiggle. Like, it's just the way that drag has exploded in the last decade or so has created a really interesting mix of people that we get to perform to now. I think the biggest change for me in drag that I've seen in the last 4.5 years is probably just the absolute breadth of people who are doing drag now and trying drag now. There has been this big shift in the last few years, which has been wonderful to see people from all walks of life coming to do drag. Like, we have non-binary people, we have trans men, we have trans women, we have just like a huge breadth of people. We have people who are like women as well who do drag now, and that is something that has, I think, elevated the variety in our scene. So that's been a huge change, to watch that go from something that people were really confused by to something that in most environments now is accepted as a part of drag. The first one that comes to mind who's been incredibly influential since I started drag is Henny Spaghetti. So when I was starting drag, I'd been doing drag for about a year, and she came into this competition called SmackDown, which is at a very traditional club in Brisbane called the Sportsman Hotel, that has been there for decades and decades, and have some very long-held views about the art of drag and who should be doing it. And she came into this competition and absolutely dominated it. And I was in the audience the night that she won, and I could have like ripped my clothes off then and there and streaked like it was a soccer game. I was so happy when she won. And even that caused a bit of protest, and there was people who were complaining and people stormed out. And she's gone on to have a permanent residency there. She's gone on to star in massive touring shows around the country. And she's someone I'm fortunate enough to call a friend, and she helped mentor me and promote me when I first started as well. And I'd say she's probably a big influence on people in Brisbane who are like her, who want to explore drag. The likes of Ladybird, Dolly Kicks, Barbie Banks, who I believe is non-binary, all these other performers and stuff in Brisbane who have come out and followed in Henny's footsteps. And not that she's the only one who was doing it at the time, but she was probably the forefront of the movement. And hats off to her, because she did face a lot of opposition. I think the hardest part in any art form is knowing your worth. And I think in drag in particular, it's not like we have a union. It's not like we have common knowledge of what everybody's getting paid. It's very easy, especially when you're starting out, because it's fairly vulnerable to go out in drag and to be an artist and to put yourself out on the line, to then go to somebody and say, hey, I want to be paid X amount of money. That's a very vulnerable position for people who are often 18, 19 years old and don't know anything other than maybe a casual job in high school. So I'd say the biggest pitfall is that people will routinely not get paid their worth. Even now, I'm 27 years old, and I still get really uncomfortable at the thought of asking people for more money or whatever. So like, you know, I've achieved lots in my time in drag so far, and I know that people come to shows to see me specifically, but I still feel like, oh, should I be asking for this? Am I putting myself out there? So that's something that I wish there was more transparency on, because I think we all deserve to get paid very well, because drag has become such a draw card for venues now. However, it's something that's very easy to do. I'd say the other big thing that people fall into is the amount of time and energy and money that drag takes means that it's not really something that you can make a lot of money doing. So even if we all got paid fantastically well, the costs of drag often completely outstrip whatever you're going to get paid for a gig. So I think it's very easy, especially again when you're starting out, to see the level that people who are on Drag Race are working at, and see the costs of these costumes that people are wearing. Even locally, when you see people who've been doing drag 5 or 6 nights a week, coming out in new costumes every couple of weeks and all this sort of stuff, it's very easy to say, I need to spend the same to then achieve the same level of success. And it becomes an arms race. And that very quickly excludes people from being able to prosper in drag because they can't afford it. Brisbane has a really unique situation as well, because our city is very based on competitions. Like, I think I've probably been in like 8 or 9 drag competitions in 4 years, which is ridiculous. But I do love a competition, it's fine. But we've had so many competitions for so long that often the people who spend the most get rewarded, not because they've spent the most, but because they're presenting often the best, most polished package. So then it's very easy to think you have to outspend people to beat them. But like I've always said, I've been in a fortunate position. I had a full-time job when I started drag, so I've always been able to spend a little bit more than probably what most people were when they were studying out. And I acknowledge that I have privilege in that situation. However, what I've always said to people and what I encourage people when they're starting out drag is that A, money doesn't buy taste, and B, money doesn't buy talent. So you'll find that there is a ceiling to people who succeed by spending money, whereas people who have talent and taste and have star quality typically will succeed regardless of how much is in their wallet. Like, for example, Henny, when she won SmackDown, probably spent $75 on the whole competition, whereas I know other people were in there spending thousands of dollars. So, you know, money isn't always the answer, but it's very easy to think that it is. Yeah, I think it's very important to persevere, because drag is, for the most part, a solo endeavor. When you're up there on the stage, you're by yourself. When you're sending your invoices, you're by yourself. When you're trying to create new ideas, you're by yourself. And the flip side to that coin is that there is a lot of inward pressure from the outside that you have to deal with. So you're kind of facing expectation, you're facing criticism, you're facing all this stuff by yourself. So drag does teach you quite quickly that you either have to accept that that's a part of it and just move on, or you can really take it to heart and be knocked back. I think it's a great exercise in growing a very thick skin very quickly, because drag queens are fucking nasty. Drag fans can be really nasty, and often your internal monologue can be very nasty. When you have all those three voices going on, it's very easy to say, too hard, I'm over it. So I think you'll find that the drag queens are some of the toughest people that you'll ever meet. And there's probably not a single one of us who hasn't had to deal with some kind of really intense hardship at some point during our lives before starting this. Like, evidently not exactly the picture of mental stability, but hey, even though on the outside, it's this, you know, this massive character, this bright, colorful character, from my perspective, where I'm sitting, I'm still the same person I was before I put all of this on. I'm just wearing a lot of really uncomfortable shit. It doesn't mean all of a sudden I've grown this extra, 50%, but you push through it, but it's very scary. And then I think purely from a safety point of view, you do end up with a big target on your back, because obviously this is a very public display of a queer identity, and a lot of people don't feel very comfortable with that. So you can be targeted going to gigs, you can be targeted online, you can be targeted in an Uber on the way home. Like, it can be quite scary. I've been very fortunate. Typically, I don't do much stuff where I'm completely by myself. So when I've left venues and done all that kind of stuff, normally I'm with somebody else. But a lot of the time you'll get yelled at. A lot of the time people will call you names as you're walking through. The good thing is usually if you finished a gig, you're full of confidence because I'm done, I'm going home, and you can push it away. But there's been a few times where you might not necessarily be in the mood, or you've had a rough day, or you're really tired. And then when you're having to deal with somebody who's potentially aggressive or potentially violent, starting to have a chat to you, it can be very easy to just freeze. But I've been very fortunate to not have any major, touch wood, any major kind of dangerous situations. But I think one thing that does happen that's not necessarily a physical danger, but can be quite tough mentally, is that when you're in drag, people do feel like they can say anything to you, whether that's lovely compliments, whether that's really intense kind of personal, like, oh my God, I've just had this insert traumatic experience here, but you've made my day so much better. And then you're sitting there going, oh, that could be very triggering for me. You don't know what I've had to deal with. Like, people just dump stuff on you. That just can be quite picky, quite nasty, and they feel like they have license to because you're a character, when really, as previously discussed, under all of this, just the same person I was before I put the wig on. So it's quite hard to, when you get home, you've got to carry all that baggage with you and take the superhero costume off and still have to deal with all the stuff that you had to face. So I think drag and gender, while they are very intertwined, for some people that is exclusively why they do drag, and for some people it has nothing to do with the reason they do drag. So I suppose I can really only speak from my experience. For me, drag is about being beautiful and funny. That is what I do drag for. I have always wanted to be a pop star. I wanted to get out and be a pop star, and then when I realized I was funny, I also wanted to be a comedian, so I'm a pop star comedian vibe. So that, for me, is what drag is about. The fact that I dress up as a sexy, beautiful lady with purple hair is just part of the fun. For me, I don't get into drag and think, oh, I wish I was this person every day. Like, I always joke to the mums at brunch because they find it hilarious. They go, oh my God, is your ass real? Is this real? I'm like, God, no. I've said I'm built like a paddle pop stick out of drag. None of this is real, and it comes off as quickly as possible. So as much as I love getting into drag, and I love the makeup in particular, it's something I very much enjoy. I love the beauty of it, and I like to be like sexy and feminine. It's not something where I'm like, I need this to express my gender. For me, I'm like, I need this to express myself, and the fact that I'm dressed as a woman is just part and parcel of drag. Drag can be an expression of a whole bunch of different things. It can be an expression of the entire spectrum of gender. It can be an expression of, if you like Pokemon and you want to come out and be dressed as a Pokemon all the time, then that's what you're going to do, and that can be drag. Drag for some people is purely character-based. Like, I know somebody who pretty much only ever comes out dressed up as like Zoidberg from Futurama, or they'll come out as Mr. Burns, or they'll come out as a frog. Like, nothing to do with gender, just wanting to come out and be a dickhead and have fun. So I think drag is a beautiful umbrella for a whole bunch of creative expression. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that we're slowly tearing away at the traditional rules of what it means to be in drag. because drag has always been about a middle finger to society, a middle finger to expectations of how you should be. So why are we then putting rules on top of it? So drag can be a lot of things to a lot of different people. Because drag now offers people the opportunity to do whatever they want and not just have to fit a pageant perfect scorecard of, you know, oh, hair is a 10 out of 10, face is a 10 out of 10, body is like perfect hourglass. That's gone now. And a lot of that comes from the fact that the second you open the door to people who don't necessarily subscribe to that, you see that drag can be just as entertaining if somebody's out there wearing flats and doing a hip hop routine. If somebody's out here performing as a cartoon character and they're not trying to be sexy at all. If somebody's out there doing a completely spoken word comedy number, that's still very entertaining. The second you see that somebody can entertain a crowd in your venue doing something other than what you've already seen, it's going to encourage you to let more people in to do exactly what they do best. If you give the same opportunities to the same people every single time, you're going to get the same result. If you allow a diverse range of talents in, you're going to get a diverse range of entertainment. And I think that is what people love about drag in 2023. I think it's not necessarily Brisbane specific, but I think if you've got a smaller city, your entertainment industries tend to intertwine a little bit because we just don't have the people power to have a exclusively drag industry in Brisbane. So you go to somewhere like Sydney and Oxford Street has 50 million gay bars. It has 50 million drag bars, which means they can have makeup stores dedicated to drag queens. They can have costume stores dedicated to drag queens. They can have wig shops with shop fronts dedicated to drag queens because there's such a demand for it there. Which means then the drag community can insulate itself and be completely just a drag scene. You come to Brisbane and we have none of that. There's still a huge drag scene here, but we don't have necessarily the drag industry here that supports it, which means we share costume makers with people who make costumes for burlesque. We share the wig people with people who make wigs for stage. Like all kinds of different industries have to come together. And I actually think it's quite a beneficial thing because we then get to do events with these other people. So one of the most successful events in Brisbane is the drag and burlesque crossover event, Rumble, which has then created this beautiful melting pot of traditional burlesque elements being thrown into drag. Burlesque is an industry that is perfectly rehearsed, costumes are perfect, every move is planned out, and you know exactly what performance you're doing in 6 months' time. In drag, you'd be lucky to know what performance you're doing in 6 minutes' time. So I think having this diverse range of entertainment industries all working together means that it influences each different branch and we get to grow and develop a unique Brisbane flavour or a unique small city flavour of drag. I think the future of Australian drag is dependent, unfortunately, on the success of RuPaul's Drag Race Down Under. If that continues to air and continues to grow, the opportunities are only going to get bigger, the industry's only going to get bigger, and we've seen it everywhere else that Drag Race has gone. All of a sudden, there's a whole industry that will then support Drag Race. So that's a whole level up from like local drag, where you've got costume designers that will only work with the Ru girls. You'll have wig stylists that will only work with the Ru girls. If that happens, it's going to create incredible opportunities for a very select few, and it will also make certain parts of drag less accessible for the majority. But it also means that there'll be 10 times more eyes on the drag scene. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword where drag becomes quite inaccessible for somebody who might not have the funds or might not necessarily be able to get or have a desire to go on television. They might all of a sudden be shut out of some opportunities, but also it's going to create a much bigger audience. So I think that the success of that show will really determine the direction on what happens in Brisbane and Australia-wide. And I think the future for Brisbane, I think as the city continues to grow, as our events continue to grow, and as more of us start to make moves around the country and get to, you know, be on the television or be on tour around the country, I think it's going to create a whole bunch of respect for Brisbane because people have a lot of respect for the queens in Sydney because they're the ones on Oxford Street. They're the ones that end up in TV commercials because all the gay marketing executives go down to the Stonewall Hotel, they'll meet a queen and be like, oh, you can come and do an ad for us. No shade to the Sydney queens, but that is the reason. It's because they're close by. I really would love for Brisbane to be seen in that same light, because we have world-class drag here, and I would really like us to be seen on the same sort of level, because just because there's not as many of us doesn't mean we're not as good.